Calling from a 277 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is David. I'm actually calling from South Africa. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Omicron variant and what's been happening to South Africa with us getting essentially sanctioned by the whole world.
Yep.
In spite of the fact that we essentially have a really, really good infrastructure sorry, I'm a little bit nervous my first time calling it.
No, and what you're about to say is incredibly important. And we actually had a clip that we were just about to play, too, about this. So continue.
Yeah, so just for context, I work in a nonprofit organization in South Africa called COVIDcomm. So I literally work in this space all day. And the effect that this is having on both our ability to deal with vaccine hesitancy in South Africa is quite enormous. So there's this whole perception that we get, frankly, it comes a bit from US misinformation that comes here. There's a large group of sort of evangelical missionaries which push anti-abortion stuff, but at the same time they push like kind of anti-vaxx sentiments and things like that. And a lot of what we're having to do to try and deal with anti-vaxx hesitancy in South Africa is deal with trust issues. But by having sort of this massive thing where our economy is now going to get hit, two of our biggest cities, Durban and Cape Town, require sort of tourism for an enormous amount of its economy, and they're not going to get that income this year, this season. And it happened last year because of the beta variant. And okay, you had Trump then, so we could sort of say, fine, the bad guys running America, lots of comments I might have there, but right now, in theory, it's the good guys, right? It's the Democrats. But then it seems like cheap political points to just sanction us again for doing what we're supposed to do. And sorry, the last one before I stop for a second is, I think we're having less than 200 cases a month. What are the chances that a country with less than 200 cases a month is going to have this scary variant develop, whereas a country which is having tens of thousands of cases, 200 cases a day, my apologies, whereas a country just having tens of thousands of cases a day is going to develop a scary variant.
Yeah, right. I saw Ramaphosa, the South African president, speaking out about this essentially, right? Like, this is a way for these, it's not just the United States that's restricting travel from South Africa now, and then from the African continent in general. It's a bunch of these other like Western countries, essentially. And it's a way for them to score political points domestically, while not doing actually anything substantive, which the only answer is to waive vaccine IP, because South Africa certainly has the capacity to manufacture it. All right,
I just want to go through a couple of things with you. First off, that I think that people have to understand, that I think is implicit in your comments, is that South Africa is far more effective in assessing the presence of a new variant than, let's say, the United States is. Because we don't do any tracking. We barely do any tracing. We have a completely effed up healthcare system that doesn't plug anything into some type of central database. And there's a ton of epidemiologists in South Africa. I don't know if the ratio of epidemiologists to actual citizens is significantly higher than anywhere else in the world, but it's pretty close, is my understanding. And it just happens to be, this is about detection, not the development of a variant. It just so happens that it's detected there, and it's the first place. So, and everybody's pretending as if it's like emanating out of South Africa, as opposed to coming from somewhere else that passed through South Africa. A and B. Yeah. Talk about the vaccine hesitancy for a moment. My understanding is that you're about 35% vaccinated. How much of this is a function? But I know, like in August at one point, the EU insisted upon your J&J shots being sent back to the EU. How much of this is a function of hesitancy? What drives that hesitancy? What group of people are the most hesitant, and why?
Well, there's a lot of different answers there. Like I said, I work in the MPO, which actually does work on this. We were basically set up because there was essentially our government struggled with some communications at first, in part because of corruption. And so where the vaccine hesitancy comes from is multifaceted. One of the big ones is actually government corruption and distrust in government. So we had something called a PPE scandal, prophylactic protective equipment, where a bunch of sort of corporations and sort of criminal enterprises literally just stole the money that was put aside for cleaning schools, for providing masks to low-income spaces, to essentially reopen the economy. So there's inherently this thing that, this is a whole big conspiracy set up so that government could just loot money. In terms of demographically, we in South Africa, there's two really, really big sort of causes of hesitancy. One is to do with reproductive health and sexual health. So there's a fear among men that the vaccine will cause impotence, which tragically, you're actually more likely to have impotence-related issues from having a severe case of COVID and long COVID, but irrespective. And the other big one is religious. And this is where we get particularly that American influence. So, the mark of the beast sort of thing is very common here. That sort of thing is really, really present. And like huge resources are going in to try and deal with that. Talking of that J&J thing, we really actually got enough supply to start supplying everyone with vaccines. And we're a wealthier country, right? We're not like, we're better off than most of the rest of the continent.
Right.
Variety of reasons for that. Won't get into it, but we're better off. We have more money, so we were able to buy the vaccine supply. We weren't able to buy enough vaccines to vaccinate ourselves until like August. Prior to that, there just wasn't enough supply. So now we have enough supply, but we're really having to work incredibly hard. The organization I work for, we're sort of doing a lot of workshops in youth communities at the moment and answering like really basic questions. We had a mother at one of our workshops recently say, so it's typically men, but you also do have women who are vaccine hesitant. And she said, the fear she has that, let's say she gets pregnant and this vaccine causes issues with her child. Then 3 or 4 years down the road, her kids, 5-10 years down the road, her kids in school, struggling, etc. And they say, no, it's because you had something to drink while you were pregnant, rather than a situation in which it could have been the vaccine. So once again, distrust. And tragically, this is literally just going to feed into it. It's that, you want to keep us suppressed. There's also sort of so in South Africa, white people make up about 7% of the population. And in spite of the fact that apartheid is long behind us, I could assure you certain racist sentiments aren't. And a lot of this will be used to say, the government is trying to undermine us, et cetera, and be used for political means as well. So there's like a variety of different conspiracy theories that this sort of feeds into. And then you now couple that with the huge economic damage it's going to do. Like, people will die because of sort of mental health issues related to poverty, their businesses going under. One of my brothers works in the construction industry. They build hotels. When are we going to start building and refurbishing hotels again if we're not having any tourists? So, yeah, it's sort of multifaceted. But I hope that answers that question.
It does. You said 7% white. Does the white population, to the extent, I mean, I don't know if the numbers are big enough. Does the white population have the same hesitancy as the black population? Or I don't know if 7% is really enough to make that assessment.
Yeah, no, it is. So when we were looking originally at stuff, white men were pretty much the worst vaccine hesitant group in the country. Originally, I don't know if that's still the case now. That's not a big deal because it's 3% of the population, and genuinely our wealth disparity is very much along racial lines.
Right.
So these are people with means, right? So they can afford to go to a private hospital. They don't have to go to the government hospitals. Not that the government hospitals don't do a good job in this scenario. In some places, it's complicated, but yeah. So it's not a big issue for us to look at the white male specifically, in spite of the fact that they tend to be quite a significant group of anti-vaxxers.
Well, I appreciate the call. What was your name again?
David.
David.
Thanks for having me.
David, thanks for the call.